What would you do if the people meant to love you most made it clear your existence was a lifelong disappointment? I'm Kennedy Reynolds, and for 34 years my name was synonymous with failure, at least in my family's eyes. Tonight I sit alone at a corner table in the grand ballroom of the governor's annual gala, the soft glow of chandeliers casting reflections off crystal glasses. I watch my brother Ryan polished charismatic work the room like he was born to command it. Laughter follows him. Admiration trails behind. To the crowd, he's the golden child, the rising political star. No one notices me in my simple black dress. Not until the governor himself stops mid-sentence, his gaze locking on mine eyes, widening. Wait, you're Senator Reynolds. And just like that, everything shifts. But to understand this moment, you need to go back to where it all began. Growing up, Reynolds in Boston came with weight, legacy, expectation, performance. Our family name adorned the stone of prestigious university buildings. It graced charity gala brochures. It opened doors so exclusive others didn't even know they existed. But behind that pristine image lived a truth I learned early: appearances were everything, and deviation was betrayal. My parents, Robert and Elizabeth Reynolds, weren't just wealthy, they were institutionally powerful. My father ran one of New England's most formidable private equity firms. My mother hosted luncheons with governors and curated friendships like portfolio assets. They had a roadmap for us drawn in ink so permanent you'd think it was law. Step 1, straight A's. Step 2, Ivy League. Step 3, finance law or business. Step 4, marry well. Step 5, don't cause scandal. Ryan, my older brother, was born for that path. He was the poster child of the Reynolds brand, charming, athletic, calculated in his charisma. My father used to beam when Ryan walked into the room as if greatness had entered with him. Me, I asked too many questions. The wrong kinds of questions. While Ryan memorized boardroom terminology before puberty, I buried myself in books about history, governance, and movements. I wanted to understand how power worked, not just how to inherit it. That curiosity, it made me inconvenient. I wasn't rebellious. I just didn't fit. The first major crack came sophomore year of high school. My English teacher assigned a research project on modern political issues. Most kids chose safe topics, recycling programs, social media laws. I didn't. I went after a controversial environmental policy one that just happened to be tied to several corporations in our family's investment portfolio. I didn't know it at the time, but my project was a hand grenade lobbed straight into my family's image. I presented it confidently, backed by research and data. I earned the highest grade in class, and then the phone calls started. I still remember my father's voice that night, his pacing across our study's mahogany floor, echoing like thunder. The Harringtons were there, Kennedy. Their foundation is reviewing a multi-million-dollar partnership with us, and now they think we're raising a radical. But the research was accurate, I argued. Don't facts matter? He stopped mid-pace. His voice dropped. There's truth, and then there's what's appropriate. You need to learn the difference. From that moment, a silent war began. One side, their expectations. The other, my truth. Cheerleading too girly. Debate team too masculine. Business school safe. Political science dangerous. Every choice I made that deviated from the Reynolds blueprint wasn't just met with disapproval, it was treated like treason. By senior year, Ryan had already been accepted early to Harvard. Our parents were practically printing future Senator Ryan Reynolds on napkins. Me, I was volunteering for a local political campaign. No one at home asked what I was learning. No one cared. But at that campaign office, among staffers fueled by bagels, coffee, and belief, I felt something I never felt at home seen. And then came the decision that lit the match. Despite having the grade scores and, yes, legacy backing, I turned down Harvard. I enrolled at UMass, a respected public university with a stellar political science program. That night, I told my parents over dinner. My father's face flushed crimson. You're throwing away everything people like us fight for. I'm not throwing it away, I said. My hands trembling. I'm choosing a different path. My mother set down her wine glass. A path to where student activism government grunt work. Lost causes, what they couldn't understand, what they refused to see, was that I had finally found something real, something mine, a calling. But to them I wasn't brave. I was broken, and that's when I realized nothing I did would ever be good enough, unless it looked exactly like Ryan's life. That realization didn't break me. It lit a fire in me so hot it's still burning today. But choosing my own path meant walking it completely alone. And the betrayal that followed was just getting started. The day I left Boston for college, there was no send-off dinner, no heartfelt goodbye, no pride in their eyes, just a quiet ride to Logan Airport with my mother who barely looked up from her phone. But as I stepped onto the shuttle bus to the terminal, my grandmother Grace pressed something into my palm, a folded slip of pale blue stationery. I opened it on the plane, my hands still trembling from everything that had led to this point. It said, "Be brave enough to be different. Someone has to." It was the only encouragement I received that day, and it became my anchor. UMass Amherst wasn't glossy like Harvard. No Gothic towers or ivy-draped prestige. But it was real. Students' work, jobs, professors challenged you, and no one cared about my last name. Here I wasn't a Reynolds disappointment, I was just Kennedy, a girl trying to figure out how to make a difference. I dove headfirst into classes hungry for something deeper than image and influence. I majored in political science, minored in philosophy, and stacked my schedule with seminars that made most people groan. That's where I met Professor Diana Mitchell. She was everything my family feared, bold, unfiltered, and deeply respected in policy circles. A former legislative director with a resume that could silence any boardroom. She taught political theory like it was oxygen essential unyielding. She called on me during our very first class, challenging my analysis of a Supreme Court case. I fumbled through my defense cheeks, burning. Afterward, she pulled me aside. "You've got sharp instincts," she said, "but stop asking for permission to speak. Your ideas matter, miss." Reynolds. I almost cried right there in her office, because no one in my family had ever said that to me, not once. They had only asked how my ideas reflected on them. Through Professor Mitchell, I found both a mentor and a mirror. She didn't care about appearances. She cared about impact. As Ryan posted glossy Instagram photos from Harvard mixers and Wall Street internships, I spent nights in canvassing offices surrounded by pizza boxes and passionate misfits, strategizing how to get young people to care about city council elections. The difference, his work earned applause. Mine earned eye rolls at holiday dinners, the first Thanksgiving. I came home after starting college. Ryan had just returned from a consulting firm internship in New York. My parents threw a dinner party in his honor, and me. When I mentioned I'd joined a campaign advocating for educational equity, my father didn't even look up from carving the turkey. "That's nice," he said, like I'd just told him I'd taken up finger painting. But I wasn't looking for applause, I was building something. Sophomore year, I joined a student-led group advocating for expanded scholarships for low-income students. We drafted proposals, held forums, and met with the administration. It wasn't glamorous. But after months of persistence, the university adopted several of our recommendations. That win, it meant more to me than any GPA or trophy. And yet back in Boston, I remained the family cautionary tale. By junior year, the divide was so deep, it barely felt like we were related. Ryan continued to skyrocket Harvard Business high-profile internships, fast-tracked career. He walked into every room wearing the family name like armor. I had to build my armor from scratch. During one holiday dinner, I shared that I'd accepted a summer position working on Senator Warner's campaign. The table went quiet. "Will it pay well?" my mother asked. "It's about the experience," I said. My father scoffed. "Experience doesn't pay student loans, Kennedy." He knew full well I had earned scholarships, ones I'd fought for. But even those victories were framed as burdens. "You took aid away from someone who really needed it," my mother added. I stared at my plate, the stuffing going cold. They would never understand. Not because they couldn't, but because they refused to try. Every choice I made that didn't mirror Ryan's was interpreted as a mistake. Every deviation a failure. The truth? I wasn't flailing. I was thriving in my own way. I was learning policy inside out, from grassroots organizing to campaign logistics. I was helping real people, students, single moms, first-time voters navigate systems designed to exclude them. And yet, each holiday visit felt like walking into a courtroom where I'd already been convicted. So after one particularly brutal Christmas, when my father announced that they would no longer support me financially, not even for health insurance, I didn't cry. I packed my bags, returned to campus early, and made a promise to myself I would forge my path with or without them. I would build a legacy, not of wealth, but of impact. Because maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't a Reynolds. Maybe I was something else entirely. My first apartment after college was nothing like the Reynolds estate. 5th floor walk-up, peeling paint, a heater that worked when it wanted. I shared a bathroom with 2 other nonprofit workers and survived on lentils and instant coffee. But I had something I'd never had before: freedom. No one telling me what to wear, how to behave, or what version of myself to present. No one measuring my worth in dividends or dinner party mentions. While Ryan boarded business class flights and posted rooftop cocktails with Boston's elite, I walked door to door in sneakers and a windbreaker, registering voters in neighborhoods the Reynolds name had never set foot in. I was working for a voter education nonprofit. Underfunded, overworked, completely vital. We created guides on the electoral process, helped young people understand down-ballot races, and ran registration drives in underserved communities. The hours were brutal, the pay was laughable, but the mission, it felt sacred. Still, every holiday back home felt like entering a parallel universe. At my cousin's wedding, my mother leaned over to a guest and said, "Kennedy is still in her idealistic phase working for some voter thing." At Thanksgiving, Ryan announced his promotion and bonus at a top consulting firm. My parents opened a $500 bottle of champagne to celebrate. When they asked about me, I shared that our team had helped increase youth turnout by 12% in the last election. My father didn't even pretend to care. How does that translate into a career path? "Kennedy," he asked, swirling his drink. "It is my career," I replied. "We're making democracy more accessible." He exhaled through his nose the way he did when something irritated him. "Let me be direct. You're 30, making what, $40,000 a year, living in some shoebox apartment with your education, your connections. This is a waste." Even Ryan looked uncomfortable. My mother didn't speak, just glanced at the centerpiece like it might rescue her. I stood up my chair, scraping against the hardwood. "Success isn't only about money, Dad. In the real world, it absolutely is." I left without saying goodbye. That night alone in my apartment, I cried for the first time in months. Not just because of his words, but because I feared he might be right. Was I wasting my life? Would I always be the one, with just enough money for rent, but not enough for security? Would my work ever amount to anything more than personal sacrifice? For the first time, I considered walking away from it all. 2 weeks later, we hosted a community forum in Roxbury. Afterward, a young single mother approached me, her daughter holding her hand. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, eyes welling. "Before your program, I never voted, didn't think it mattered. Now my daughter sees me reading candidate bios, filling out my ballot. She knows her voice matters, because of you." That moment rewired something in me. This was why I kept showing up. Not for recognition, not for family validation, but for people like her, people who finally believed they mattered. Shortly after that forum, I met Logan Mitchell at a political fundraiser. He was tall, sharp, with kind green eyes and a quiet intensity that immediately disarmed me. "Ah, the famous Kennedy Reynolds," he said when we were introduced. "My mother says you're going to be governor someday." I laughed, unsure if he was mocking me. "She also says you've written policy memos better than some elected officials." That was his mother, Professor Mitchell, my mentor. Logan was working as communications director for a progressive state representative. We ended up talking for 5 hours that night about electoral reform, campaign, messaging, equity frameworks, and 90s indie rock. It felt easy in a way I didn't know was possible. With his support and the experience I'd built, I made the most terrifying decision of my life. At 31, I filed to run for city council. No trust fund, no political machine, just me, a few volunteers, and a borrowed campaign office that used to be a dry cleaner. When I told my parents, my mother looked at me like I'd announced I was joining a commune. "City council," she repeated. "Kennedy, be serious." "I am serious," I said. "I've already filed the paperwork. This is embarrassing," my father snapped. "You'll lose. Waste what little money you have." "Then, what I've thought this through," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have a campaign manager, a strategy, a team. We're focused on community engagement." Ryan, who had recently become chief of staff to rising star Governor James Blackwell, said nothing, but his expression gave him away this again. He finally spoke. "Politics is more complicated than you realize, Kennedy. It's not just about good intentions." "I'm well aware," I replied, biting my tongue. "Good intentions don't knock doors or write policy briefs." "I do. Our campaign was scrappy. We knocked thousands of doors, held listening sessions in laundromats and church basements. We skipped TV ads and focused on human conversations. Election night came. Logan and I gathered with our volunteers at a small neighborhood restaurant, nerves twisting in my stomach. When the final tally was announced, I'd won by 128 votes. The room erupted. We cried, we screamed, we hugged. I checked my phone. No messages from my parents, no call from Ryan, not even a passive-aggressive email, just silence. When Ryan finally texted a day later, it said, "Congrats on the council seat. Small pond, but I guess it's a start." And my mother. She told a family friend, "The district must have had very low standards." I should have been crushed, but instead I felt freer than ever, because I knew deep down they didn't get to define me anymore. Becoming a city councilwoman didn't magically fix everything. There were no parades, no public congratulations from my family, not even a passing mention in their Christmas newsletter, though Ryan's new job title earned bold font and a glossy photo. Still, the work grounded me. My days were filled with town hall meetings, transit proposals, zoning disputes. Unsexy, unglamorous, but real. I fought for affordable housing, safer streets, and mental health programs for underserved youth, and I was good at it. By the end of my first term, I'd built a reputation for being relentless, principled, and shockingly effective. Local papers called me the policy wonk who delivers. It wasn't flashy, but it got results. Meanwhile, Ryan's face was everywhere behind Governor Blackwell at press conferences beside him in glossy magazine spreads. Our parents clung to every photo. He was the Reynolds legacy incarnate. Me, I was the afterthought. At family events, I became background noise. My mother would introduce me as our daughter Kennedy. She's doing public service of some kind. My father would pivot the conversation to Ryan before I finished a sentence. I stopped attending altogether. The estrangement was quiet but complete. The only person who never turned away was my grandmother, Grace. She called occasionally, sent handwritten notes, invited me for lunch at her assisted living home where she sipped tea with elegance and watched Senate hearings like they were soap operas. "You remind me of your grandfather," she told me once. "He had principles, lost friends over them too. I suppose that's the cost of a soul." She wasn't dramatic, just honest, and her words stitched together pieces of me that the rest of the family tried to unravel. When a state Senate seat opened due to the incumbent's sudden retirement, I didn't hesitate. I had built community trust, proven legislative chops, and most importantly, I wasn't owned by anyone. My husband Logan, yes, by then, we had married in a small, sunlit garden ceremony surrounded by friends, allies, and Grace was the first to say it out loud, "You're ready." We crafted a campaign rooted in the same principles as before: direct voter contact, transparent funding, no corporate strings. When I called my parents to let them know I was running, it was mostly out of courtesy. My mother's response: "Don't you think this has gone far enough?" She said this. "Not your work, not your career." As if it were a phase, a tantrum. I kept my voice calm. "Mom, I'm 33 years old. This isn't a rebellion. It's public service. It's impact. If you move forward with this, do not expect support from us, financial or otherwise. I've been on my own for years, I said. That's not news. When I hung up, I felt nothing. No heartbreak, no rage, just confirmation. They'd never see me. Not truly. The campaign was grueling. State-level politics brought higher stakes, uglier tactics, and more invasive scrutiny. My opponents whispered about my family estrangement. Political blogs speculated about what must have happened for the Reynolds to turn their backs on one of their own. And still, we climbed. At the lowest points, Logan reminded me who I was. He brought tea when I hadn't eaten, pulled me away from work when my eyes blurred, and reminded me daily that this path mattered. On election night, we waited in a modest hotel ballroom with folding chairs and catered trays of pasta. When the numbers came in, we had done it. I was officially State Senator Kennedy Reynolds, the youngest woman in our state's history to hold the office. The victory was covered in local press, a handful of national columns. But my parents? Silence. No call, no message, no champagne. The only family member at my swearing-in was Grace, seated proudly in the front row in a pearl-trimmed navy jacket. When I embraced her afterward, she whispered, "I always knew you were meant for something extraordinary, not in spite of the family, but because of what you saw through them." That moment felt like a baptism. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was building something entirely my own. During my first year in the state Senate, I pushed bills on education funding, healthcare access, and government transparency. No grandstanding, no viral moments, just policy piece by piece. Reporters started calling me the quiet reformer. Behind the scenes, party leaders took notice. Meanwhile, Ryan's star rose higher. As Governor Blackwell's chief of staff, he was lauded for his strategic brilliance. My parents proudly shared articles about him, gushed over his potential to run for office someday. Me, I barely existed in their world. According to my grandmother, their new go-to line was Kennedy's pursuing her own path, said with tight smiles and strained grace. But that path mine was leading to something far bigger than any of them imagined. When a U.S. Senate seat opened for a special election, my name was floated first quietly, then loudly. The National Party called, "Are you ready to go federal?" I looked at Logan. I was born ready. The invitation came on cream-colored cardstock, the kind that smells faintly of money and power. Governor James Blackwell requests the honor of your presence at the annual Children's Education Foundation Gala. No personal note, no message. Just my name embossed alongside a formal RSVP. But I knew Ryan was behind it. As Blackwell's chief of staff, my brother controlled every name on that guest list. I stared at the envelope for hours. Was it a mistake? A trap, an olive branch? "Are you going to go?" Logan asked that evening, finding me still at the kitchen table, the card untouched. "I don't know," I admitted. "It feels like walking into a lion's den." "Maybe it's time," he said gently. "You're a U.S. Senator now, Kennedy. You've earned your place in any room, including theirs." He was right. I wasn't the scrappy campaigner anymore. I represented millions. I shaped federal policy. I deserved to be there. Still, I didn't go to be seen. I went because my position demanded it. Because no matter how they saw me, I knew who I was. The night of the gala, I chose a black silk gown. Simple, understated, powerful. Logan in his tuxedo squeezed my hand as we stepped out of the car. "Remember who you are," he whispered. "They don't define you anymore." The ballroom gleamed like a Monet painting chandeliers, glittering string quartet, humming political elites, swirling like they owned the night. From the entrance, I spotted Ryan immediately. Perfectly tailored tux, easy smile, laughing with donors as if the world had never handed him a no. He didn't look at me, not once. We were seated near the back, far from the governor's table. A subtle but deliberate choice enough to acknowledge my office, not enough to invite attention. I kept my smile in place, engaged in small talk, sipped champagne like it didn't burn going down. And then I heard it. "That's the Reynolds girl, isn't it? She never quite found her way. Such a shame." The brother, he's the successful one. I don't know why those words still stung. After everything I'd built, after everything I'd become. But they did. I excused myself, retreating to the restroom to collect my breath. Staring at my reflection, I reminded myself, you don't need their validation. You already won. They just don't know it yet. I returned to the table as dessert was being cleared. The lights dimmed. Governor Blackwell took the stage, praising donors, rattling off statistics, highlighting education reform efforts. I barely heard him, until he said I'll be making my way around the room shortly to thank key supporters personally. The words barely registered until the hush hit our table like a wave. I looked up, and there he was, Governor Blackwell walking straight toward me, aides behind him, security flanking him, Ryan following, head bent, scribbling something into a notepad, oblivious. The governor stopped in front of me. He squinted, then blinked. "Wait, you're Senator Reynolds." His voice wasn't loud, but loud enough. The entire table froze. I stood extending my hand, composed. "Yes, Governor. It's a pleasure to meet you in person. Thank you for including me tonight." He took my hand with both of his. "I had no idea you'd be here. Your work on the Education Committee, remarkable. I've been meaning to reach out." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ryan's head snap up. Color drained from his face like someone had flipped a switch. He stepped forward stiffly, clearing his throat. "Governor." "Senator Reynolds is your sister," the governor interrupted, turning toward him. "Yes, I've just been informed." He blinked, genuinely confused. "You never mentioned you had a sister in the Senate, Ryan. Why not?" The moment stretched awkward and charged. Ryan hesitated. "Family can be complicated." I stepped in, my voice calm. "But ultimately, Governor, we all serve the public in our own ways." Governor Blackwell, ever the politician, recovered quickly. "Well then, a family of public servants, quite the legacy. We must have you both to the mansion sometime." He moved on, shaking hands, posing for photos. Ryan and I were left in silence. He turned to me. "Kennedy, I didn't know you'd be here." "As a U.S. Senator from this state, it would have been unusual for me not to be invited," I replied smoothly. "That's not what I meant." I met his gaze. "Then what did you mean, Ryan? That you didn't expect to be held accountable, that I'd stay in the corner where you and Mom and Dad put me?" He glanced around, aware of the eyes on us. "This isn't the place." "No." But it was the moment, I said quietly. And it was bound to come. Just then the governor's wife beckoned me from across the ballroom. "Excuse me," I told Ryan, "I have people to meet." As I walked away, heels silent on the marble floor, I felt something I hadn't in years, not vindication. Clarity. They couldn't erase me anymore. The woman they branded as the disappointment was now Senator Kennedy Reynolds, and everyone knew it. The headlines rolled in the next morning. Senator Reynolds' surprise appearance at Gala sparked stir. Blackwell aide's sister. Quietly rising in national politics, Boston's best-kept family secret just went public. 3 days later, my office phone rang. It was a number I hadn't seen in years, my father's private line. "Your mother and I think it might be appropriate to have dinner," he said without preamble. "To clear the air. Not, we're sorry. Not, we were wrong. Just, circumstances had changed. I appreciate the invitation," I said, "but before any dinner, we'd need an honest conversation about years of dismissal, of erasure. The past is the past, Kennedy." "No, Dad," I replied. "You chose not to see me. You told people I failed. While I was passing legislation, you pretended I didn't exist." A long pause. "Perhaps we had different perspectives," he finally said. "It's not about perspectives. It's about respect." We ended the call in a kind of stalemate, his silence the closest thing to an admission, my boundaries the clearest they'd ever been. That weekend, Logan and I had lunch with Grace. I told her everything: Ryan's face at the gala, the governor's surprise, the sudden shift. She smiled gently. "I've been saving these," she said, pulling a small folder from her bag. "Inside articles, printouts, committee hearing transcripts, even screenshots of op-eds I'd written. I followed your work from the beginning. Your parents couldn't see it, but I did, always." Then her voice dropped. "Your grandfather, he was like you, brilliant, visionary, but not the type the family celebrated. Your father spent his life trying to be what his father wanted. When he saw you reject the mold, I think it terrified him." Her words hit like truth usually does, not with a sting, but with sudden clarity. Maybe their rejection of me had less to do with me and more with what I mirrored back to them, the path not taken, the courage they never had. Weeks later, Ryan reached out. Not through intermediaries, not with excuses, just, "Can we talk?" We met at a quiet coffee shop near my district office. He looked tired, older, less polished. "I owe you an apology," he said, setting down his cup. "Not just for the gala, for everything." I waited. I let Mom and Dad define the narrative. Let them treat you like the outcast because it made my life easier. If you were the rebel, I didn't have to question anything. And now, he looked at me. Really looked. Now I wonder if I made all the right choices, if doing everything right ever really made me happy. That conversation didn't magically rebuild trust, but it cracked something open. For the first time in years, I saw Ryan not as my rival, but as someone also molded by impossible expectations, someone still unlearning. Over the months that followed, we began rebuilding. Texts, occasional dinners, cautious but real. My parents were harder. Eventually, we met for that dinner. Logan sat beside me, unshakable as always. The conversation was civil, polite, careful. My mother said, "We may not have always understood your choices, Kennedy, but we never stopped caring." I nodded. Caring isn't the same as respecting, and I won't accept anything less anymore. My father raised his glass. To Kennedy, who had the courage to define success on her own terms. Not "we were wrong," not "we're proud," but for them, that was a breakthrough. And for me, it was enough, because I no longer needed their permission to believe in my own story. As the months passed, Logan and I began talking seriously about starting a family of our own. One night, curled up in bed, I said, "I don't want our child to ever feel like love has conditions." "It won't," he replied. "They'll grow up knowing their voice matters because they'll watch their mother change the world." At 40, I sat in the Reynolds dining room, once a courtroom, now just a room. My father raised another toast this time with a tremor in his voice. "You made a difference, Kennedy, a real one. It wasn't perfection, but it was honest." Looking around that room, I realized something unexpected. I hadn't just rewritten my story. I'd changed theirs too, not all the way, not completely, but enough to open a door. One my daughter one day could walk through with her head held high, because her mother had been underestimated and didn't let it break her. She let it build her. Maybe you've been underestimated too, dismissed, overlooked by the very people who should have believed in you most. I hope you know this. You don't need anyone's permission to write your own story. You don't need approval to live a life that aligns with your values. Sometimes the deepest wounds shape our greatest strength if we dare to rise anyway. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, share it. Subscribe. Drop a comment below and tell me, when were you underestimated? And what did you do next? Because sometimes being the disappointment is just the beginning.